Was it really inappropriate to write a pull request for the company I interviewed with? This happened to me last year while I was interviewing with a company for a position I didn't get. I'm currently employed elsewhere, but I'd like to know for future applications. I had an excellent phone screening. According to them, they said I was a strong candidate, and the first technical interview with one engineer went very well. Between that second interview and the final interview, I found their software had an open-source API on GitHub, written in Python. I looked at it for a while and found a much simpler and future-proof way to write one function, and I opened a PR with the change without mentioning that I was currently interviewing. When we started my third interview with two engineers, one of them mentioned that he saw my pull request and it was inappropriate for me to open it. He said that it came across like I know more than them as a fresh college grad, and that I haven't considered why they coded it how it was. I didn't end up getting the job. Was it really inappropriate for me to do this?
The part that gives me the most pause here is a much simpler and future-proof way to write one function. I haven't seen your code and have no understanding of the context of your change, but it doesn't sound like you fixed a bug, added a feature, improved performance, or otherwise did something that the project maintainers considered meaningful. I can see how submitting a pull request for an unsolicited change of this nature might not have left the best impression. Many open-source projects, and frequently closed-source development projects too, aren't run like Wikipedia articles where everyone is encouraged to make small changes all the time. There's a non-zero cost that comes with any change: the time to review and test and approve it, the risk of breaking something even with a robust test suite, creating something that fewer team members understand, etc. As a result, many projects aren't particularly big on changing things just because there are an infinite number of ways to write any function, and nothing would get done if everyone regularly changed existing working code to meet their personal definition of best. When it's time to refactor, that's more likely to involve a project maintainer rather than a first-time contributor, and it usually has some kind of justification attached. These are norms, and like all norms, they vary and are generally things you're expected to pick up through osmosis rather than be taught. If you were a recent graduate, it's likely that none of this was particularly apparent at the time. Most pull requests address a more obvious need, fixing a bug or adding a feature, and even in those cases, it's often better to discuss the task with the maintainer first, as they may have context and preferences you're not aware of. So I don't think it's inherently inappropriate to ever submit a pull request during the interview process. It certainly shows interest and enthusiasm, but from their perspective, they may have seen you as someone who is likely to rewrite working code without much justification, and then they, unfortunately, reacted negatively and condescendingly toward you. Which, helpfully, tells you a lot about them and what it would have been like to work with them.
Clearly it wasn't a good tactical choice for this company, but it's pretty silly to go to the trouble of setting up a public repository and then disdain people for having the chutzpah to submit pull requests. Saying no to a pull request is hardly a burden. Heck, they could simply have ignored it. If I'd been the interviewer, I would have given you bonus points for demonstrating real interest in the company and showing that you know how to work with an open-source project in a public repository. That would be true even if the submitted code was naive about the problem being solved. Since a job offer is on the line, you should be sure that the code you submit is of high quality, get somebody else to look it over, and keep any comments in the code or in the pull request humble and polite.
You have misunderstood the feedback you were given and focused on the wrong part. He said that it came across like I know more than them as a fresh college grad, and that I haven't considered why they coded it how it was. The problem isn't that you issued a pull request, but that you did it for something that made yourself appear arrogant, ignorant, and unaware of your own limitations. You describe your change as making their code much simpler and future-proof. It seems obvious from the quoted section above that they disagree. What's more, since they are more experienced than you and familiar with their own codebase, it is very likely that they are correct and you are wrong. It is common for graduates to emerge from their degrees strongly overestimating their own competence. They weren't annoyed because you issued a pull request, but because you appeared to demonstrate a lack of understanding of your own limits and a lack of respect for their skills in the submission that you made. Likely, you compounded this impression during interview. Finally, don't read too much into any particular part of any particular interview. It may be that this had nothing to do with you not getting the job and they just had a better candidate. You don't know. Don't obsess over this setback and instead focus on the next application. Good luck with your job search.
Inappropriate might not be the best word, but not strategic would likely be accurate. As what sounds like a perhaps still relatively new worker in a technical field, one of the first things you will need to learn is that decision-making about how to do something, and when it is worth changing it, is not a simple matter. Given that you have an impetus to change something that already worked without being asked to, you are likely to find yourself often accused of worshipping the new and shiny, without understanding the cost of change, complex reasons why something was done the way it was, or the full scope of new issues your idea would introduce. Or maybe they're just small-minded people who found you annoying. The thing is, to an extent, it doesn't matter what is objectively best, it mostly matters what is subjectively best for an organization at a given point in time. Change has a real cost in breaking existing awareness, so a new method needs to be substantially better in ways that matter and not just a little better in theory or a little more aligned to contemporary trends and thinking. If you want to volunteer on something without being asked to, you'll likely get better reception for tackling real outstanding bugs that impact users, than in making bold rewrites of things which already worked. If you come to understand an unresolved issue, see if you can make a change that is as small and minimal a diff as possible, with a first-class commit message. Make it obvious why this one change is the right way to solve the problem, and make it one that fits seamlessly into the current style and methodology of the code. Give them a pull request that is easy to approve and does not invoke any complex feelings of trade-offs. If you truly believe a section needs to be rewritten, save that thought until you are being asked to contribute and are aware of priorities, history, and the nature of the codebase overall, and be prepared to understand why the change you want to make is not consistent with their priorities and plans somewhat counter-intuitively. The more you can demonstrate understanding of the current code by making fixes that fit seamlessly with its traditions, the more likely you are to gain trust to take things in new directions. You can also casually float drastic changes in a more informal way. Hey, I was thinking we could make this part a lot better if we rewrote it to use spindle folding, and gauge the reaction before actually doing it.
Speaking from the other side of the desk, on a personal level, I'm quite happy when an applicant even has GitHub repos or some other kind of portfolio, and has done some background research on what the company does. This is like 3 to 5% of all applicants. An applicant who potentially demonstrates both of those very directly, by fixing, improving our code? They probably missed a great hire, and you certainly avoided joining a terrible culture.
You did nothing wrong. If a pull request that refactors one function of code rocked their boat, that doesn't leave a lot of room for more complex interactions. The role of the project maintainer, or reviewer, is to disentangle any politics, perceived arrogance, incompetence, from the code itself, and review the code objectively. If a reviewer receives a pull request and only focuses on the politics, how dare you raise this PR, and doesn't even review the code, they are being very ineffective in their role. To be honest, it doesn't sound like they are looking for someone of your caliber. Be happy you'll join a better company soon.
As it Kirillesa said, it may have been your comment, not your PR. What did you enter as the comment to your pull request? That is the key missing piece here. You may have unintentionally communicated in your comment that the original developers were idiots and that you were far superior. The key word here is unintentionally. As a developer, it's very easy to do. I'm not saying you did this, but it's a definite possibility. Or they're scared of dealing with a fresh out with initiative. Another possibility, as others have mentioned, is that they're overprotective of their code, and perhaps they don't want to deal with mentoring a fresh college grad with initiative who is going to need, as with all others in the same boat, significant mentoring and oversight to make sure they don't make any huge blunders. I speak from experience here, having been one of them years ago. Or they don't know how to interview. They may just not know how to interview for the type of candidate they want and botch their side of the interview process.